Hi, welcome to the session Microsoft Graph Toolkit. It's magic. So this is the agenda for today. I will give you the background for Microsoft Graph Toolkit. Then we will discuss the development scenarios. We'll go through the components of Microsoft Graph Toolkit. Then I'll have some cool demos. We'll also browse through the playground of Microsoft Graph Toolkit, and I'll explain the advantages of Graph Toolkit. So let's begin with the background of Microsoft Graph Toolkit. So Microsoft Graph Toolkit, this was solely developed with an intention to help developers of all experience levels to expedite the development of web application, a Microsoft Teams tab, and SharePoint web part that connects to the Microsoft Graph. Consider a scenario to implement a login module with state-of-art security, industry standard authentication in your application with existing identity system. Or consider a scenario where you're interacting with Microsoft 365 data from your native application, modifying it and saving it back to Microsoft 365. If we consider these scenarios, if not weeks, it may take days to implement with multiple developers. Whereas this can be done with the web components, Microsoft Graph Toolkit components with few lines of HTML tags. And that's where I call it a magic. By definition, Microsoft Graph Toolkit is a collection of reusable and framework-agnostic web components and helpers for accessing and working with Microsoft Graph. In short, Microsoft Graph Toolkit is a collection of web components. You can use these components as is, or these components are extensible and customizable with templating and CSS custom properties. So these web components are developed with, there are different specifications like ECMA script module specification, the template specification, HTML template specification, the shadow module, shadow DOM specification. So these all are combined into this web component, and that is helping to pull the data and showcase the data with Microsoft 365 experience. Now let's talk about the development scenarios. Consider you're writing an application that leverages Microsoft 365 data. So as we all know, there is one endpoint which rules all, that is Microsoft Graph API to interact with Microsoft 365 data. But if you have to implement that in your native application, first and foremost, you need to finalize the auth flow to go with. Then you will need to write a code to issue a request to Graph endpoint. In this, you have to take care of the authentication, issuing of the access tokens, and packaging that authentication access tokens and sending off it with a request. So once you do that, you also need to then implement the handlers once you get back the response from Microsoft Graph, and then packaging it into objects. There might be a scenario that you might get an exception, and you need to do an exception handling for connectivity, for token expiry or caching, etc. So to handle these scenarios, Microsoft to handle these scenarios and help developers, Microsoft introduced the Graph SDKs. So this Graph SDKs, they are designed to take care of the general plumbing task that you're making call to Graph API. So things like authentication, or you're making requests, or handling the response, or report if something goes wrong. So these kind of scenarios are handled very efficiently uh, by Graph SDK. So everything happens behind the screen, and with few lines of code, you are able to raise the request and get the response back. But this is all about getting the response or the data back from the Graph API. Uh, Going one step forward, uh, this is the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, which is going to help the developers uh, in to the next level, where it is not only going to get the data from the Graph API, but it is also uh, designed in a way to look like, to give the Microsoft 365 experience. It is implemented with Fluent UI. So in short, you will not only get the data, but also you will get the UI of Microsoft 365 experience, uh, which enhances and helps the developer to large extent. So a lot of things are easier seen than said. So let's get into demo, and I'll show you a few things. So before that, this is the list of the components. We have login component, we have person, people, agenda, tasks, person card, channel picker. So and the important one, MGT get. So these are the different components which are implemented, and we'll have a demo of this. So what I've done is I have created a folder called code, and in that I have created settings.json. To complete this demo, I have installed an extension which will help us to, which will act as a live web server. Okay, so this extension is live server, which will help us that if I make any changes in my HTML, I can those will be reflected, and we can see the magic before our eyes. Okay, so we are starting with this is the index.html. Okay, so we have the tag created, HTML tag, we have the head and body tags, and this is the h3 which is available here. Okay, so we'll first add the loader. So loader is the script which will help us to initialize the components, or rather load the components. Okay, so I have added this JS. This is also available. So either you can use this loader JS, or you can use the npm package. There is a package with the name Microsoft/MGT. If you want, you can also use the node package manager and install that package. But in my case, I have used the JS. Okay, so let me add the component. Okay, see, as soon as I have added the component, I see the button. Okay, so this button is not functional, so let's add the power to this button by adding the mcell provider. So mgt mcell provider. So this provider, there are different providers for SharePoint, for Teams. I'm using an mcell provider here. So in the background, this mcell provider uses mcell.js to make the Graph API calls. For this provider to work, we need to register an app into Azure Active Directory. So I have registered it already, and I have a client ready with me, client ID ready for the demo. But if you're not aware about the registration of the app, I'll share the link in the description and you can use that to register the app. So because I was already logged in, I can, as soon as I have added the client ID, you can see that it has changed and it is showing my name. Okay, let me sign out so that you see the experience once again. So this is my sign in button and this is the MCell provider and the login component. And as soon as I entered, it will ask me to pick the account. And if I pick the account, I get the login. So I remember the times when we had to implement the login functionality where you are handling the sessions. Uh, you need to provide, there are multiple calls that needs to be made even for Microsoft Graph when it was introduced. I remember the time when we had to uh, we have to identify the endpoint URLs, the authorized URLs, and then handle those uh, initiate those calls to get the access token and use that access token to validate the identity. So this all is encapsulated with this web component. So this is the component, and this is the part where I call it as a magic. Okay, so let us get to our next trick in the magic, where I am going to provide the next component, which is tasks. Okay, so as soon as I added this component, you can see that from my planner, all these uh, tasks which are assigned to me, you can see it here. Okay. And not only this tasks are available, I can add a new task. Okay, so I can add it to my plan, to my to-do list, and I can select the date. So you can see that within this web component, there are multiple components which are embedded, and you are seeing the whole experience with a single tag. Okay, I have assigned it to myself, and you can see that it is added. Okay, so I have just selected the June 11th, and I have I can also delete the task. So this is the beauty of this web components. So everything related to this application, where all the graph API calls are made in the background, and you just need to provide the components and few attributes to this components to get the data back from graph APIs. And also, once you get that data back, you have the power, or you can extend the CSS, custom CSS properties, or you can extend the template to show the data as per your business needs. Okay, so I have shown you. So let's check the attributes. So once in this tasks, I am going to add a attribute of data source of to do. Okay, as soon as I have changed the attribute and selected to do, this attributes have changed, and I can see the task in my to do list. So similarly, you can change the properties, you can add the attributes, and there are events available as well against each of these components, which you can leverage and write simple JavaScripts to utilize and make the graph calls and have this data manipulated as per business needs. Okay, so let me show you the next component, which I'm calling as a next magic trick. So here, now I'm using MGT agenda. This is the attribute, And you can see here that I am using me by events and order by subject and agenda. So I can also, when I'm making a call here itself, I can also um, pass these parameters, and based on that you can see the data is rendered. Okay, so you can also, there are attributes to control the number of items that can be displayed. Okay, so let me make one. Yes, so this is the one item which is available, which can be shown here. So there are different components, and all these components can have different properties and attributes. I will show you uh, the final one, which I have, which I was saying that it's the most powerful one. That is the MGT get. So with this MGT get, uh, all the graph API endpoints, you can call the graph endpoints, and you will get the data in the form of a template. And with this template, you can modify the once you get the data, you can manipulate the data based on your business needs. So if you see here, all the lists which are available in the root side, I have got the list of all the lists in the root side just by making a simple uh, by adding this component, and then I'm displaying the data as per my needs in this way. Moving on, I talked about the extensibility of the not only the component but also of the CSS properties. So let me show you that. So we are using MGT person. Okay, and I'm writing a parameter here. Okay, so this is the parameter, and then I'm adding two more parameters to it. So I have added the show name and show email. So this is how you can show the person property. And on this, now I'm going to change the style. Okay, so in the this tag, so this is how you can apply your custom CSS properties, and the data will be visible, or you can manipulate the components. Okay. Going back to the slide. So all these components which are available, similarly uh, to Microsoft Graph Explorer, we have a playground called MGT Dev. I'll just I'll go back to the slide and go back to the browser, and let's see the. So this is the playground where you can use and see all the components which are available. You can see the tabs here. You have a canvas tab where you can see the component. Once you add a component here, it is displayed here. You have this three tabs: HTML, JS, and CSS. So if you want to play around and see what kind of data is coming through, and if you modify or add a JS, what data can be, how the data can be manipulated, you can do that with these three tabs. Also, you see there is a tab called Docs, and with this Docs tab, the all the data or the properties which related to this particular component are available. So all the attributes which are required, because you might not know all the attributes, so this really helps you to not only see the attributes but also the properties and the events as well, and the CSS properties which you can add your own custom CSS properties or modify the existing CSS properties or override these properties to modify and the display of this data. So on the left hand side, these are the details what we have. So current components, we have a login, people, picker, a person card, tasks, and all this, so on and so forth. So for the beginners, this is the best place to start. Coming back to the slide. Now to summarize about the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, um, what are the advantages of Graph Toolkit? So the first advantage is the cross-browser compatibility. These components are compatible with all modern browsers, including i11. So all these components also work in um, all the modern browsers. There are no additional library or frameworks required. So you can use your normal HTML, CSS, and you don't need any other framework to have this component implemented in your application. It provides a familiar programming model. It's just DOM, CSS, and HTML that needs to be manipulated. So it's really a familiar programming model. It works well with new framework. So all the new framework, also the new features of web platform like uh, shadow DOM, we have CSS custom properties, we have HTML templates, these kind of modern web platform features. You can these work well with all those frameworks and platform features. Also, this is tightly integrated with the browser's dev tool. So all the data which is displayed, you can see all that data in your dev tool, and based on the data which is coming through, you can manipulate that data with CSS, with JavaScript, and show the data as per your business needs. So considering all these features and advantages, I think that Microsoft the Graph Toolkit uh, is a magic. These are the different resources. We have Dev Playground, GitHub, Block Series is available. Documentation for this is available, and web components. So these are the different URLs you can try it to get more information around Microsoft Graph Toolkit. It has multiple areas and other features as well. So considering that, I will have additional sessions for that. But for today, uh, this was the details which I would like to share today. And thank you for joining the session. Thank you.